In today's video, I smooth parts for photo etch, fill gaps, experiment with oils, and much more. The kit I'll be building today will be Revell's 2015 tooling of the Handley-Page Halifax, Mk.III. When I got this kit, it came with a dwarred detailing set and masking. The only other thing I bought for this was a custom Decal set from Above and Below Graphics. The set depicts 408 RCF Squadron's Zombie, of which has ties to my family. The detail in this kit is amazing, as is the best Halifax in 72nd scale you can find, with Matchbox being a close second. Because of this, it is a largely sought after kit. I'm lucky to have my hands on this. One of the best parts of this kit is the amount of detail. The engines are very detailed, as well as the interior, which has many small parts. It is a shame to have to sand these down, though after using photo etch parts, it should look better than ever. The first step I do with any kit is clip off any parts used in the interior process, and sort them in a parts divider. As good as this kit may be, like others there are many ejector pin marks across the interior parts. I help combat this by diluting some water-soluble modeling putty with water, of which I apply to these marks with a toothpick. While waiting for the putty to dry, I sand down the raised details on instruments in order to apply photo etch parts later, making sure to clean the plastic dust with some water after. After sanding down the putty, I start to glue large pieces of the interior onto the base. This will help keep things smooth when painting. It also means unpainted photo etch parts, which need to be bent and assembled separately using superglue. For gluing, I use Tamiya Ultra Thin Glue, which helps make a seamless bond. I noticed a handrail missing on the interior, so I made a new one out of old speaker wire. Another detail I created were the wires on the back of the instrument panel, using the same speaker wire. It may not have been seen in the end, but it's always nice to add these small details. I then work on the smaller assemblies, which makes storing and painting these parts a lot easier. There are two windows on this version of the aircraft that are not in the version I am building, so make sure to glue in the windows before painting in order to fill them in. After these are in, I clean the surface with isopropyl alcohol as to not leave any fingerprints or oils behind that could affect the painting process. The bomb bay and wheel doors are not separate from the start, so I open them using a scriber, cleaning the frayed edges with a hobby blade. After priming the interior in black, I can move on to painting the grey green, not forgetting the wheelbase and other small builds. Once the paint is dried, I can move on to masking the front off in order to paint the black section of the nose and other small parts. I can then remove the masking after leaving the paint to fully dry. At this point, it is safe to glue on and attach the photo etch parts, which help add another level of detail to the base kit. I also added seatbelts to the seats, replacing the previous plastic seatbelts. With everything with an acrylic gloss varnish to seal everything in. Once set, I dry brush the black area with a dark gray to add depth to the plain black surface. I then apply a diluted dark brown wash to the green to give it depth. After sealing everything with a flat coat, I also added a drop of gloss varnish to each of the instrument dials to simulate the glass covers. At this point, I can glue in the clear plastic parts to the side using ultra thin glue so as to not fog up the glass. I make sure to clean the clear parts with water to keep them clear. With everything glued and weathered, I can now glue the two halves of the fuselage together using tape and more glue. After the glue has dried, I noticed a large gap running down the middle of the fuselage, so it is essential to fill this gap in order to achieve a seamless look, which really appeals to the eye once finished. While waiting for the putty to fully dry, I move on to masking the canopy and all other clear parts, painting later on with an Edouard masking set and liquid masking solution. Once the putty from before is dried, I can sand it down with a coarse sanding sponge. coarse sanding sponge does leave small but noticeable scratches in the surface. I combat this by sanding with higher and higher grit sandpapers to achieve a smooth surface. Using thick vinyl tape as a guide, I can rescribe lost panel lines using a hobby blade followed by a panel scriber. Before starting on the priming process, there are many small and large parts to assemble. I start by assembling the wheelbase, which were weathered during the interior weathering process. It is essential to assemble parts before priming and painting in order to achieve a cleaner and more seamless look to the overall finished build. This also means gluing in all clear parts that belong on the main part of the aircraft, except for the nose glass, which requires further assembly. I then glue the wings to the fuselage using Tamiya cement, which allows for a strong bond between the parts, ensuring no accidental breakups between the fuselage and the wings. I glue together smaller parts, such as the wheels, guns, and engines, together using ultra-thin glue. I also get to work gluing together the engine covers and wheel struts together. In order to keep the paint from overspraying off using masking tape, an alternative way to do this is to use sponges or cotton balls. I use clear parts glue to glue on the nose glass, since it needs to be removable for proper gun assembly later on. The clear parts glue has less adhesion, allowing for the part to be removed with no damage. Before priming, I spray all masked areas with the interior color of the clear parts to be the correct color. whereas primer being used first will make the inside of the clear parts black. With everything assembled and prepped, I start priming in black. The primer will help the surface be one color, so there are no inconsistencies within the paint color once applied. Black is my preferred priming color, as the end product of the kit is a darker, more toned down look. It also allows for easier pre-shading work with more versatile uses. Once everything has been primed and the primer has dried, pieces, such as the engines and propeller tips. After all the small parts have been painted, I can focus on the main coats of paints. This time, I tried a new form of pre-shading. I first outlined the area to be painted. After this step, I airbrushed all of the inner parts of the panels, leaving the panel lines darkened. Once finished, I go over the area in a light coat over a painted surface that highlights the panel lines, allowing for a more appealing look. After allowing the paint to fully dry, I can apply the masking to the painted areas. Usually I make my own masks, but this kit had the camo masking set with it when I bought it, so I didn't want it to go to waste. After applying the masks, I noticed small unpainted areas, though these were fixed later. Before I can paint the green on, I first paint the overspray with black primer, in order to achieve more paint consistency. You may want to learn from my mistakes though, as this step caused black to leak under the mask and created a raised line in the camo borders. Using the same process as the brown, I airbrushed the green paint onto the kit, making sure to be consistent. Although it has its flaws, the end result of this method looks great after touch-up. Once dried, I mask off the camo and start spraying the black. Although black on black seems counterintuitive, the color I'm spraying is a mixture of black and sea gray. This mixture allows for a less stark color and makes it look slightly worn or faded. I then add some Hull Red to the mixture, which will help create a less unified look on the surface. It's very subtle, but it's noticeable in the end. I also spray the tires using rubber black, giving it a more realistic look rather than standard black colors. I sprayed the exhaust fronts and engine cover fronts using a copper color. Revell calls for antique bronze. but I do not have that color in acrylic format, so I make do with what I have. Once everything has dried, I can finally move on to sealing everything with a gloss lacquer varnish, which will allow for a smooth surface for the decals to be applied to. If decals are applied to a matte surface, silvering will occur and ruin the look. The lacquer varnish will also protect the paint from any decal solutions or washes. I allow the varnish to cure for 12 hours, after which I apply the decals. You can use microset to strengthen the bond between the surface of the model. I make sure to squeeze out the excess fluid using a Q-tip. You can also use microsol to help the decal conform to the surface and the small details a lot better. I allow the decals to fully adhere to the surface before sealing them in with another coat of gloss varnish. After leaving the gloss varnish to cure for 24 hours, I began the weathering process with a wash. I'll be using Floor Model's Dark Dirt Wash. I honestly can't recommend this stuff enough. It's extremely easy to use and is very versatile. I apply this to everywhere except the black, where it won't be seen. Since it's clay-based, the dried wash can easily be removed using a slightly dampened paper towel. I make sure not to remove too much of it as to not remove its effect. I then moved on to applying a simple white panel line accent to the black painted areas. This will help make the black less unified. It will also help the highlight. I remove any excess that may have spilled over with some enamel thinner. To remove the panel liner from the surface, I wipe it off with a dry paper towel and some Q-tips. I then spray down a coat of flat lacquer varnish. This will help prepare for oil weathering and acts as a protective coat on top of the washes from the oil weathering process. Once dry, I apply a small amount of chipping in areas that see a lot of wear and movement before I begin the main weathering process. For the engine pipes, I first wet them with a brown accent color. I then stipple on a coat of dark earth pigment on top, giving a burnt metal look to the pipes. Before I lay down the oils, I prepare the surface with white spirit. This will help ease the process of blending and streaking, making sure that the paint doesn't fully stick to the surface. I start by applying a dark brown oil color to the edges of the engine areas, as well as the panels near the fuel caps. Once applied and slightly dried, I then dragged down the oils in the direction of airflow using a brush championed with white spirit, giving a leakage look to the surface and making it more appealing. I use white oils on the rondelles and colored surfaces to give them a slightly faded look, as well as making the color less stark and less uniform. I also apply a light coat of white streaks to the side of the aircraft. To seal in the weathering, I apply a coat of Vallejo matte varnish. Although I usually use lacquer varnish, this type helps give a flatter look than what I usually use. While it may not be entirely realistic, I'm going for a more stylistic look. Once dried, I can remove the nose and prep the model for masking removal. It's always important to be careful when removing the masking, as there is a chance of scratching the clear plastic. This happens to me at least once per kit, so it's always something to be aware of. Once the masking has been removed, I can work on gluing on the rest of the parts. This step is honestly one of my favorite parts of the build, as it's the part where everything quite literally comes together and brings the progress one step closer to completion. Using clear paint, I paint the signal lights on either side of the aircraft, making sure the colors are on the right side. As I was about to attach the tires, I remembered that I forgot to weather them. I apply a light dusting of concrete pigment around the tire's edge. This helps to give them more dimension, it also makes them seem worn. After that distraction, I resume work on gluing on the parts of the kit, starting with the bombs. The final step to completion is the rigging, which I attach using a very small amount of superglue. With rigging, a little glue goes a long way, and is more effective in smaller amounts. With that step completed, I can finally set the model under its own weight, signifying its completion. Here is the finished result.